US is much bigger. There's more people. There's more things, and that fundamental thinking of if you have an international kind of like vertical agnostic product, why don't you think international from day one? You see a lot of companies kind of say, okay, I'm gonna find some customers in my hometown and prove that. Then I try to get after 3 or 4 years, I get crazy and I'm trying to get into Sweden or Denmark. That's stone by stone thing.
Yeah.
If you have an amazing product, think big and think internationally.
Hey there, welcome back. This is a raw and unfiltered conversation with the legendary unicorn founder Lasse Andresen that I believe every founder in Scandinavia should listen to. We talked about why Norwegian startups need to stop thinking small, lessons learned from an IPO at Nasdaq and from the painful early days without funding and also selling ForgeRock at $2.9 billion. What Norway's startup ecosystem needs to do to truly compete on a global stage, what founders in Scandinavia should consider, and what the typical traps they fall into are. This is a really punchy chat a la Lasse with tons of amazing stories, insights, and advice. We discussed why Lasse only has a plan A, never a plan B, what it really takes to go from zero to unicorn, and so much more. Hiring and firing, how boards can slow you down. I mean, this conversation has a bit of everything. I really enjoyed it, I loved it, and I'm sure you will enjoy it too. So without further ado, I bring you Lasse Andresen. This episode is brought to you by Gnist. At Gnist, they're passionate about helping their customers build digital products and services that create value for users, businesses, and society. They help you with the tools and practices you need, whether you are a developer, product lead, tech lead, or a business leader. Gnist strongly believes in the power of people and cross-functional collaboration in order to create tomorrow's digital solutions. They are Norway's leading boutique consultancy in product and technology leadership, transformation, and change. Lasse, we are live. It's so good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Fantastic.
You are the founder and CEO at IndyKite,
Yep.
where you are building a new category of data management and digital identity services by capturing, connecting, and controlling data across the enterprise and surrounding ecosystem.
That's a
I did my
mouthful.
homework. yeah, I did my homework. And before that, you were we had many roles, so we're gonna talk about that. An amazing journey. But before that, I think I should emphasize you were co-founder and CTO at ForgeRock,
Yep.
which is a unicorn.
Absolutely. And done it once, you want to do it again.
That's how it goes. Amazing. And am I right that it was sold by 2.3 billion?
Yes, actually, we first we did an IPO, so we got listed on Nasdaq for close to like a $3 billion at the first day. It also went up and down, and then it got taken private again by Thomas Bravo, and that was like 2.9 billion or whatever.
Okay. Wow. Nice.
Dollars.
Okay.
Not
So
Norwegian.
let's. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. A true unicorn for sure. Amazing. Congratulations for that, by the way, and for IndyKite and for everything that you're doing. Also for the community, startup community in Norway, and I'm sure in the US too. So let's start at the very beginning. Lasse, you know, it's not every time you meet a unicorn founder that is also trying to found another unicorn. So I'm usually, I realize that it always starts with a vision. So walk me through, how was it for you at ForgeRock? And maybe you can also touch on IndyKite. Where did this vision come from? How was it for you to take that vision and get it started?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's kind of like I'm born curious, and I think that's the motivation and the drive. I'm curious on technology. I'm curious of people, everything, and I've always been that way. It's kind of like I do this because I love it, and honestly, after the IPO with the ForgeRock, I don't have to work, but this is what gets me out of the morning, kind of like bringing great team together, great technology, building new stuff, innovate, and of course the most important thing, see how it's used by our customers. It's kind of like that is the the most rewarding thing. It's kind of like, yeah, if think about it, if you are home cooking and make a lot of food, and nobody comes there to actually eat it with you. It's not fun anymore. But the vision was pretty simple actually, because I was working just before starting ForgeRock. I was working in a company called Sun Microsystems. That got acquired by Oracle, and yeah, I didn't want to follow that path, and and of course, if you're looking from a technology perspective, kind of like knowing what's what and who is kind of like the holy grail. Every service is moved online basically, and how can you provide secure services? You need to identify who actually is the user. What is this person kind of like able to do or not to do? Like it's good when you check into your online banking, you see your bank account and not mine, or maybe you would like to see mine, by the way. But for providing great kind of like online services, it has to be secure, and it's all about security and identity management. And that was kind of like pretty easy to see, to be honest.
Nice. And I mean, and you, of course, you sound like very customer oriented,
Yeah.
and centered around the customer problems and their experiences. And I'm wondering, once you realize their pain points, walk me through that journey of how did you find out their pain points, like very practically, the practical journey. Did you talk with lots of customers? Were you hands-on having those conversations and then trying to translate that into solutions? How was it for you in the beginning at ForgeRock, at least?
Yeah, I actually I did a lot of kind of like I actually had private dinners and inviting customers that I've been working with in the past, and kind of like show them my vision. I had a fake company presentation just to get the reaction, and I think. And it's quite interesting, a couple of things that came out of this. One thing was, if you talk to a lot of industry people and kind of like other people, they say they do only one thing and do it really, really well, which sounds reasonable. And I talked to customers and I said, you know what? I don't want another niche vendor. For solving my problem, if I need to kind of like have a Lego kit and combine it myself. So even if you don't have everything kind of like from day one, you should have a platform that has enough capability that actually solve the whole problem and not only a part of it. So that's why I also went in and said, okay, we're going to build a platform, horizontal. So it's kind of like vertical, kind of like agnostic. Yeah. Makes it much easier to scale. So I listened to my customers and I started building a horizontal identity and access management platform that did the authentication, it did the provisioning, and had a lot of function. And not everything ready from day one, but we knew where we were going.
Yeah, and that's, I think, very inspiring, because back to your point, a lot of companies these days, they choose going verticalization rather than horizontalization because of the risk. So they say, well, there's no chance we're going to build this massive product. Let's just specialize into a vertical. Let's then go hyper vertical and serve a niche and so on. But you did the opposite. You knew you wanted to go horizontal from day one, because you've talked with customers and you understood that that's what they needed. They needed the holistic solution. Yet there's of course the risk thing. How did you navigate that? Because, once you realize, it's my assumption, once you realize that, okay, it has to be horizontal, it has to be a platform that, with a lot of capabilities and functionality, this is going to take time. Yes. So how was that decision for you guys? So
it was kind of like, first of all, it was kind of like you really need to be committed to that. And kind of like, I never have a plan B. I only have plan A. Of course, I get good feedback on the way I learn, and I'm not stupid. If somebody says something that is smarter than I was thinking a second ago, I say, oh shit, that makes sense, and I change. But I don't kind of like have any plan B in anything I'm doing. And specifically on this thing, again, also you can't be half pregnant. That's also impossible. So you need to go all the way. We were kind of like extremely broke. We didn't have any investment. We had a
Oh wow.
the first year was really tough. And, I'm kind of like, but one thing that we were very focused on is like sometimes you start a company and you have clever people, and a lot of people you're talking to say, hey, I don't want your product, but can I buy some hours from you? Can you do some consulting because you have amazing programmers or engineers, whatever? And that's where we said, no way. If you kind of like start selling your engineers as consultants, you're never going to be able to actually build that product. Will it be painful? Yes. Will you suffer? Yes. Did I have to sell my car? Yes. But it's all in.
Yeah, I love that. You only have a plan A, there is no plan B.
No.
I feel that so many companies need that mindset. And especially if I can share, Lasse, with you, and you probably, maybe it resonates with you, in Scandinavia, we're very like consensus-driven organizations.
Totally.
There's always discussions about, well, plan A, but then there's plan B, and then there's plan C, and then people can talk for years about what kind of company do we want to be, what kind of decisions do we want to be, especially for startups. And then you end up not actually going with intent to to choosing one path.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, how I'm trying to understand in this next question a bit of your leadership style, because you have that plan. So how do you go about, maybe in your experience at ForgeRock, how did you go about communicating that intent and being clear on the vision? And how frequently did you communicate that with people and reminded them? Like, walk me through a little bit your style as a leader.
I think kind of like one of the things which is very important is kind of like is that be open to all sorts of people, if you know what I mean, from a diversity perspective, and much beyond kind of like men and women, which is kind of like a very stupid coarse grain of thinking about it. So you will meet engineers that kind of like would like to sit in a corner and code and don't want to socialize in any way, and you have hyperactive people, and you need them all, and you need to meet them where they are and respect that. Sometimes I say that to if you were a manager for Rolling Stones, you think Keith Richards was easy to manage? Probably not, but again, it became one of the largest rock band in the world. So actually, be open, be transparent, and be honest, basically. And it's okay that not everybody likes me or not everybody kind of like agree with me, but when I say something, I mean it, and I think that's very important.
It is very important, and I feel that. ForgeRock, at some point, I can imagine you introduced very different leadership layers. As the company scale, maybe not. You can probably comment on that. But is this something so this vision you had, this plan A, is this something that you've been very hands-on, kind of leading, or at some point you got to a scale where you had to kind of step back a little bit?
No, I think I never stepped back in any way.
Yeah.
What kind of happens a lot of time is that you have too many ideas, and also kind of like sometimes you forget to inform people about the context. So you run and you think everybody knows what's going on in your head. And then you turn around and say, there's nobody behind me. So you basically, oh shit, why didn't they follow you? Because I forgot to tell them where we were going. So the ideas never stop. After a while, you figure out that there's only this amount of time, this amount of resources, so you have to choose. And that's probably the tough one, if you know what I mean. And then you get more pragmatic.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is very tough to say no, right?
Yes, that's the hardest thing, especially when you're born curious and you want to do all these cool stuff, and then it's really really hard. So, but I have good people around me that stops me when I run too fast.
Okay, that's good to know. But then it seems like, you guys were very sort of disciplined on saying no, basically following the strategy, following the vision. So I'm wondering, like, building products, there's of course different ways of building products, as you know. And it seems like you were very close to customers. So
Yep.
I'm trying to understand, did you, throughout that journey, would you bring problems to solve for the teams to solve and then empower them to solve those problems, like the product managers, engineers, designers, or were you more hands-on, crafting with them what the features should be? Like, how close were you versus not? There's this founder mode type of motion. There's different opinions on this. I'm trying to understand how you led ForgeRock to the unicorn it is today.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I said I think there's different styles, and I don't think that it's right or wrong. Personally, I think I'm pretty good at finding good people, and put them together. And of course, if you give people the trust and the opportunity, normally kind of like 9 out of 10 times or 11 out of 10 times they overperform, and say, okay, I want to do this. Go and figure it out. If everything goes kind of like okay, that's great. And if there is a problem, don't come back with a perfect kind of like explanation why it didn't happen the day you're going to deliver. Tell me a month before that we have some issues here and we can figure out how to solve it. But trusting people and let them go, give them air, give them opportunity. Normally you get more than you ask for. And it gets inspiring for them instead of like I think the worst thing you can do is micromanagement. If you need to micromanagement, you're either a bad manager or you have wrong people.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. Couldn't agree more. I'm a big advocate of empowering teams with context, like you were describing before.
Yeah.
Letting them run, but ensuring those people are actually competent to solve the job.
Yes.
Otherwise, you've made some perhaps wrong hiring decisions. But you said that you were really good or pretty good at finding the right people. Let's double click on that one, Lasse.
Yeah.
I think it's a very important one. Like, hiring is so important, especially at early stages, and in many startups and founders that might be hearing this conversation. Is there anything you look for when you're hiring for example, a leadership role? If you're hiring for an executive to come along with the journey, is there anything, any tricks, any mental models, anything you've learned to look for?
I always start these conversations with the same question, and I've done that for like a decade or even longer. It's kind of like I ask, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What is your passion? Kind of like, why do you actually want this job? And of course, there's in my head right kind of like answers to that, and there's wrong, and if they don't have the passion, they don't want to be part of this, and they are kind of like would like to be in a startup with innovation. It's more like, I'm here because I can make a lot of money. No. So I'm looking for what gets people out of bed in the morning. What's drive them? What is the passion? And that very easily tells me a lot. And
go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't think there's again, that's right or wrong. We need them all in all shapes and forms and colors. But if you're a startup, you're a product company, kind of like, there are specific drives that make that happen. Somebody wants kind of like a very secure thing. Everything should be in place. Everything should be figured out. You kind of like you have the whole building plan in front of you. That's not what you need in an innovative product company. You need people that actually, again, are curious and are driven by figuring it out.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering was there any, well, probably you've made some hiring decisions that didn't turn out to be what you wanted.
Yes.
So double question on that topic. One, how early did you figure it out that it wasn't the right fit? And second, how did you handle it?
Good. First question, you actually normally figure it out pretty soon, to be honest. And then it's kind of like, what do you then do? And I'm quoting two good friends of mine, and one of them said, have you ever regretted you fired somebody too early? When you finally do something, you know you should have done it a long time ago. And also for, there's humans involved, there's families and stuff, and of course you want them to succeed, everything. But it's not even nice for somebody. They also know that they are not performing in their job, if you know what I mean. And then maybe there's a better fit somewhere else. So another good saying is that if there's doubt, there is no doubt. And I've been kind of I've been better, kind of like these days to actually take actions faster than in the beginning. As a manager, I always know there is, if there's doubt, there is no doubt, basically. So you should execute, and it's good for them, it's good for the company, and you need to take the ego out of these things and ask yourself one question: what is good for the company? And if keeping that person is good for a company, fantastic. If it's not, because you need something else, you should take action.
Absolutely. Okay, let's then go kind of doubling down on some aspects of the journey, because you mentioned in the beginning, ForgeRock first IPO'd, and then you basically sold it privately. Can you take us through the whole IPO thing? Like, how was it for you? Where were you? Like, how was that experience?
It's interesting. Of course, this was an IPO in the US, so we kind of like ended up at Nasdaq. And people are asking, say you need to kind of like have to be like 100 million in ARR to actually think about doing an IPO. Honestly, there's no specific rules, but actually doing that process of doing it is extremely expensive. Like we had to hire 6 new people in accounting to just making sure that all the numbers and the governance and the audits and everything is ready. So it's not kind of like that you can do an IPO you can do an IPO whenever you want, but kind of like it's going to take you Nasdaq 1.5 years. It has to be the right timing. You need to kind of like spend a lot of money on accounting, audits, and lawyers, and you need to figure out is it worth it? Can you afford it?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then at some point you did realize it was worth it, so you went through that process. Walk me through the day, you know.
That is actually kind of very interesting and special, because of course the IPO was when there was COVID. Okay. And kind of like just before that, I decided to start IndyKite, so I jumped off, and my visa was with ForgeRock. So when I left the US, of course, during COVID, if you didn't have a visa, you couldn't come back. You couldn't come back on the ESTA again. So actually, at the day of the IPO, I was in Oslo, basically standing like this in the front of a Mac with my headset and talk to somebody in New York. So I haven't ring the bell, honestly.
Really? Oh my God, that's so funny.
Yeah. So that
and you couldn't go, and then you couldn't go back then, or
no? Without a visa during COVID, you couldn't enter the US since I'm a Norwegian citizen, and my kind of like my visa was with ForgeRock that I have resigned from. No, and then I went down to the bar and celebrated alone, and then fell asleep.
This has to be the most iconic like IPO founder story.
It was a little bit. It was interesting.
Yeah, very.
So that's why I had to do it again. Like I need an excuse to go back to New York.
Absolutely, I agree. No, you will do it again. I'm sure. So okay, but then, if I can ask, I think a lot of founders aspire to either IPO or big acquisition. How was it? What did you feel when the moment was actually when you had that beer by the bar and then ultimately you did fell asleep, but okay, maybe the morning after. How was it for you? How did you feel?
You know what? It's almost when you kind of like you read a great book and you close it and you put it away. That's how I was feeling. And it was just fantastic kind of like journey. Everything I experienced, all the people and all the stuff we're doing, and the crazy stuff and the other stuff. But when it was over, I didn't feel that I lost the child or something or anything. It was okay, good book, close it, put it aside, okay, and do it again. So
start it again, exactly.
Yeah, so it was kind of like almost no feelings, if that's right to say.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
interesting.
At least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you started IndyKite.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct.
So and what was the vision then?
And a lot of these things with IndyKite was things that I wanted ForgeRock to do, which I was not allowed to do, and probably there could even be timing and good reasons for that, and some technology was probably not kind of like as stable. But if you look from ForgeRock perspective and identity and access management, identity was basically the same as a human. But if you think about it, everything has an identity. Like I have a social security number, a car have a VIN number. A car has a manufacturer, I have a mom and dad. I have a color, a car have color. And so everything out there, devices, things, phones, companies, whatever, basically has an identity. And they are all connected. And there's more human beings, now more things connected there. And now with AI agents, they have an identity. If not, what are they doing for who? So the vision has like, let's get out of that thinking that identity and security is only a human is the user. It could be whatever. So that's what I really would like to take to the next level. And that's what we're doing with IndyKite. I don't care if it's a phone or a car or a device, a human, but they are connected and there's relationships between them, and there's a lot of dynamic things going on. So it's really cool.
That's very inspiring. Lasse, if there are founders and there are founders listening to this conversation, what are some of the lessons learned along the way? Because you are a serial entrepreneur. You've done a lot. You've succeeded at so many levels. So I'm sure you have a lot of mentorship, or conversations with founders. Like what's top of mind usually when you talk with founders? What's kind of the top advice you usually give?
Oh, there's a lot of topics here, of course. But I think if you think specifically for Norwegian kind of like founders, kind of like from a sales perspective and a market perspective, kind of like US is much bigger. There's more people, there's more things, and that fundamental thinking of if you have an international kind of like vertical agnostic product, why don't you think international from day one? You see a lot of companies kind of say, okay, I'm gonna find some customers in my hometown and prove that. Then I try to get, after 3 or 4 years, I get crazy and I'm trying to get into Sweden or Denmark. That's stone by stone thing.
Yeah.
If you have an amazing product, think big and think international. You don't. And then the other thing is, of course, if you look on the US when it comes to startups, the customers are much kind of like easier to sell to, because they want to take a chance. You don't need kind of like 250 kind of like references or have Equinor on your reference list to be able to sell something.
Absolutely, yeah.
So think out of the box, international from day one if it's an international thing, and don't wait for 5 years. Time is of essence in so many ways, from land grab and everything. So I think that's extremely important. And then when it comes to advisors, make sure you don't kind of like take in like famous used to be people. The thing is, and what I'm trying to do with that is kind of like things are changing so fast. And if you were a successful CEO for kind of like 10 years ago and have since then only been playing golf, I don't think you're updated now, even if you had a fantastic thing back. So if you go for mentors and advisors, try to find people that kind of like are hopefully still operating or just recently, because the knowledge, the market, everything changes all over the time. So so I think that's and the other thing is with Norwegian companies, specifically in the beginning, they normally have bigger boards and they have employees. What? That is not impressive, guys. Come on, like if you're 3 guys or girls or whatever, and you have 6 kind of like grumpy old men on your board, it doesn't make any sense. So maybe you don't need a board the first 2 years.
Absolutely, yeah. Jason Fry talks a lot about this. He advocates for, from Basecamp, he advocates for no boards.
Of course, when you start fundraising, if you go with a VC, stuff will happen, but that's not the first thing you should think about, kind of like the first 3 months of your startup. It doesn't make sense.
No, I agree with you. Okay, but then just to clarify, then you mentioned think big.
Yep.
Why the hell would you think super like stepping stone? I love that you said maybe in 3 years we go crazy and we go to Sweden.
Yay!
Because look, alas, I love it because I see that so much. That mentality in the Norwegian startup ecosystem. Unfortunately, that's how many startups think. We're gonna scale in Norway, then we're gonna go to Sweden, then maybe Denmark. So then we get the Nordics, so then Europe after that in 5-10 years, maybe and by the time, there's the market, the category is already taken, and it's much more difficult and you're not competitive.
Totally.
So then why do you think that is? Like, do you think this is a mindset thing, or do you think there are like more structural blockers that Norwegian founders are facing?
I think first of all, I think it's a mindset thing, but I would also say I think things have changed to the better with like today's founders. If you go kind of like 10 years back, oh my God. So there's definitely improvement in the mentality, I would say. And maybe also it's a little bit kind of like if you're very, very afraid of failing and you don't want to look stupid, you kind of like, you want to play it safe, and you play it so safe that nothing happens. So kind of like, I think you need to take the ego out of it, go for it, and if you stumble, you stumble, and go up again. I think the most important thing for a founders is persistence. Because, and this is also in music or film or whatever, kind of like it could just be at the right place at the right time that makes the big breakthrough. But if you don't, if you're not persistent and you don't keep on doing it, you normally say it's a lot of self-inflicted pain, and you need to like it.
Absolutely.
So I think this is some of the reasons that people are basically playing it safe. There's so many startups that is started kind of like in the evening in the kitchen table while they still have a full daytime job.
Yeah.
And you need to jump, and then you can go on ahead. So you need to quit your day job if you're going to do a startup.
Absolutely. And so I'm wondering if this is also related to limiting or to the venture capital landscape in Europe, or specifically Scandinavia. It's of course more difficult to get funding in Scandinavia than it is in the US. Do you agree with that? And is there anything founders can do to get attention from either local, but I would say even like the big international VCs?
I think you're definitely true, kind of like on these things, because you see a lot of the mentality is that, and the first questions you get from a lot of the Norwegians is, when are you cash positive? It's kind of like it needs to fit into an Excel spreadsheet, and what is your business model? Can I see your P&L here and you don't know basically.
Yeah.
So the attitude, and also I say, like, if you're going to drive from Stavanger to Oslo and you only have kind of 1 liter of gas in your car, now of course it's electric, but you will not get there. Like so why bother even starting it? So you need to have enough funding to actually be able to execute what you're doing. Norway traditional is been very driven by kind of like the kind of like when are you cash positive. US is more or less about kind of like do they get conviction in your dream, what you're trying to do, and they take the risk together with you. So there's definitely different. I even see that now, kind of like that Europe is much more conservative than US when it comes to making bets.
Absolutely, and it from both sides, from venture capital side and from founders. Both are more conservative than US. And even if you take like funds in Europe, they're of course smaller, apart from a few exceptions, they're smaller. So that also influenced the portfolio strategy is much more, well, they're looking for those fund returners, but it's more difficult, so they play safer. Yeah, it is. Everything is interconnected.
Yeah, and also as you say, kind of like the funds are traditionally smaller, meaning that kind of like they can fund you to one specific stage. There's no way they can follow you all the way to the unicorn, and then kind of like as a startup founder, you need to start from scratch with total new people again. Instead of if you can start with somebody that actually give you a little bit more money, they have more money when you need it, and you deliver, of course. But some of the funds are so small that after round 1 or a seed or whatever, they don't have more.
Yeah, they don't have enough reserves for follow-on rounds, and some of them are not even thinking about fund 2 or 3. It's very complicated. But I wonder, what's the solution then? Like if you were a founder in Norway, Lasse, like now, and you were thinking, okay, I need to get funding for this. There's of course small pre-seed, seed funds in Europe. There's of course the larger ones. What would you do?
Jump on a plane.
To the US.
Yeah, or London, which is probably cheaper and easier. If you have a great product, you have a great team, kind of like just talk to other people. Again, just jump on a plane. That's what I would do. And interesting. And also of course, one other thing is of course also in the early stage, make sure that your cap table doesn't kind of like look like yellow pages, because that's gonna hurt you later on. So I think a good advice is when you're doing a funding round, always think of the next one, because you're building the foundation for the next step. And sometimes you do stuff in one round that actually prevent you to take the next one. So you should always think the next step, and not only I'm just going to close this. I don't care who it is. He said he'd never been in jail. I'll take his money. But no, think about the next round when you
absolutely. I think that's really great advice. And also, if I could follow up on that, it's also about for founders to understand the venture capital business, to understand what they are looking for, what the incentives for them are. Because I don't know. Of course, I talk a lot with founders that do understand, but I also here and there talk with founders that are thinking about raising, but they don't really understand venture capital, and that's a trap. Because then, of course, they're not going to consider dilution. They're not going to consider all these things, who they bring on board, and all that.
Yeah, I normally say kind of like if you don't like your wife or your husband before you get married, it doesn't get better afterwards. So absolutely, you need to understand they are in this for a business. But also it's very important kind of like not every company needs to be a unicorn to be a very successful company and have a lot of fun. But it's very important that your investor have the same strategy, if you know what I mean.
Definitely.
If you're going to build a unicorn, you can't do that in 9 months.
Absolutely.
Then you need investors that gives you enough time to get there. But if you have investors, if you want to be a unicorn and the investor would like to sell you within kind of like 18 months, it crashes.
Absolutely.
So you need to find people that, I don't care if it's a big dream or small dream, but then you need to have dream the same. And then you have, it's a partnership.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And when you mentioned like the think big culture, it also reminded me of, I was talking with Paul Nass from, co-founder at Gelato, and he also mentioned that, with Henrik, like also super from the beginning, this culture of we are going to be number one in the world. We are going to be huge. And that's been sort of the intent from day one. And they made it. And I think that's really important to that emphasis that you mentioned.
Yeah, and they knew it can't do that in 6 months.
Exactly.
So you seek the same people and the same partners that has that dream and give you the time to achieve that.
Absolutely. And then you also mentioned the think big and so on, and then you mentioned advisors. And then you mentioned boards. So I just wanted to double click. We talked a little bit about this too, but I just wanted to double click on the advisors, because of course advisors can be a good source of information and insight. But your point is make sure that these people are actually hands-on today, rather than these sort of names that are not active anymore, because they might be outdated. And their advice might be flawed, basically. And then let's double click on boards a bit, Lasse, since we're talking about venture capital, which, by the way, wasn't really the intention, but this is what I love about having this conversation. It's super informal, and it goes wherever it goes. Yeah. But if I could double click on boards, what are some do's and don'ts for boards, because there's some really interesting dynamics, and of course there's very efficient boards. So with your experience, having observed probably both and mentored founders with probably both, what do you think are some do's and don'ts of when it comes to boards?
From behavior from board members, you think specifically, or?
Yeah, for board members. If someone is a board member right now, what do you think are some of the things they shouldn't really do or think twice, and what are the things they should really focus on in a way?
I think
generically speaking.
I think a couple of things. I think first of all, being a board member and only show up in the board meeting, and it doesn't make any sense. As a board member is actually what you do between the board meetings that actually has value for a company and for a founder. So that's one thing. I'm also kind of like, if kind of like the board member is in 25 other boards, yes, that is a business model for a lot of people.
Yeah.
They probably don't even know which board meeting they are in, and they need to kind of like reset their brain to figure out, well, where am I now? What's the context? So I wouldn't go with these super board members that are kind of like doing this for a living. I want people that actually are active between the board meetings, and also as a founder, as a startup, if something is not working, you probably know that first and better than anybody else. So kind of like have board members that are kind of like sticking their fingers in your eyes and highlighting problems that you already know. It doesn't help, because you as a founder are already, you're living and breathing that pain every day, and it doesn't help if somebody comes in and tell you the same. So, but I think the most important thing, be active between the board meetings, and make sure that you have a board that actually are interested in what you're doing, so they can actually give you advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Lasse, I just wanted to also make sure I cover one thing that I wanted to cover, which is your biggest lesson learned, or at least maybe top 3 if you have something that comes to mind. In your amazing journey so far, I'm sure you've collected some lessons learned that you think about maybe every other month. What are those? Anything that comes to mind?
A couple of things. Of course, we already talked about hiring and hiring the wrong people. And sometimes the thing kind of like it's better to have somebody in there except for having nobody. No, don't. If you don't fill a share just because you want to fill a share. If no one, then is having it empty is actually better. I think that's a good thing. When you're hiring kind of like leaders and management, again, figure out what is their passion. What do they want to do? Begin following the same dream. If you hire leadership that kind of like is really, really driving for a quick exit and hope that there's going to be an M&A kind of like within 6 months and they're going to be rich, and you want to actually build something and take it public or do whatever, I think that's very important to see what is the reason and what is the motivation. If you hire a new CEO, great, but being a CEO of a public company in the US is probably not a lot of fun. So you probably need to ask yourself, is this actually something a person that actually really would like to take all that pain? So think ahead, look for the motivation, and match it into what you want to do. And again, there's nothing right or wrong, but it's really wrong to having people that don't share the same dream and want to build the same thing. And if you want a quick one, do a quick one. If you want to do something big, it's going to take longer time, and then you need to be on the same page.
Absolutely, wise advice. If you had a magic wand to solve some of the challenges we have in the startup ecosystem in Norway. So I'm jumping a bit from topic to topic, but I just wanted to go into that again, specific into the Norwegian ecosystem. If you could solve one thing, what would that be for us to be a bit more competitive than we are today? I mean, you already mentioned a few things, jump on a plane, but I mean, if there's anything that for the Norwegian startup, exactly. Yeah.
This is maybe controversial, but that's probably what you're looking for. I would reorg Innovation Norway.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me more. Tell me more.
The thing is kind of like whatever every startup actually is struggling with in the beginning, and I'm talking about getting the foundation right, is kind of like is the agreements, the legal setup. What about tax? What about option plans? All of these fundamental things. How do I write a contract with a big company and an employee agreement, whatever? Like all of these kind of things that you don't have money to have good lawyers. So I was thinking kind of like if Innovation Norway, instead of like handing out kind of like 100 kroner and this here and 100 kroner, which basically doesn't take you far. If they had the best tax lawyer in Norway, the best kind of like employment, kind of like HR agreements, and have a team that basically makes all of these foundational thing super clear and give that out, and making sure that every company that actually start on the right foundation to get the next step. I think that would have much more value for startups than getting pocket money in the beginning.
Yeah.
What really kills you could be a tax issue. It could be an option plan that you didn't think about, or it could be things that you put into an employment agreement, or maybe you didn't have an employment agreement. There's a lot of stuff. So having the best of the best in the HR, in the legal, in the tax, in the accounting, getting advice on that, and I think that really would help a lot of startups.
Yeah. And for context, for those who are listening and might not really know too much about how it is today, then are you saying that Innovation Norway does not provide those types of that type of support? Is basically, or
no. They give you a little bit of money and basically good luck, and they do a little bit of money in many places. And again, if you only have 1 gallon or 1 liter of gasoline on your car, you don't get far. So and I think getting all this infrastructure in place has much more value for startups.
I think that's really interesting. So would you solve the problem through increasing the size of the fund in a way, or would you be more strategic and fund less people?
I would absolutely fund less, and I also would spend a lot of money to kind of like giving all of those legal advices and all that out for free, basically. So because kind of like you get this amount of money. And if that is spent kind of like on legal bills all the time, you don't have money to what you should do. If you can get all these kind of services in there, I think that we have much more value than only kind of like small amount of cash.
Cool. Okay, Lasse, last question, and then I'll let you go. You clearly, and you did say, when I asked you what is kind of the main advice for founders, you said just jump on a plane. I'm wondering, what are sort of the main super like in-your-face differences from building a startup in San Francisco compared to Oslo or even London? Like, I'm trying to understand why the jump on a plane kind of metaphor. Like, why is it that, of course, apart from the obvious reasons that I'm sure you'll tap into, but why should they really consider doing that?
I think it has a lot to do, again, with the attitude and also kind of like the pay it forward culture over here. Like you have a lot of kind of like successful founders here, and a lot of them have probably started more company than I ever did. And they're always willing to take a coffee and share and be able to kind of like be a part of that and get so much advice, introductions to people. Like everybody said, yes, yeah, sure, I'll meet you. I can take a coffee. Maybe that kind of like that's 30 minutes of your life that you never get back. But very often you meet people and they guide you to something else. So that pay it forward culture and that thinking of helping each other, it's much stronger or easier, I would say, to get access to. We tend to kind of like start when we're talking to people in Norway. Can we? I'm okay to send it, but can you sign an NDA? For Christ's sake! I have some people coming to me and they say, okay, I have this amazing idea, but I can't tell you before you sign an NDA. and then basically I tell them, you know what? If that's true, this is actually 1 out of 2. Either you're way too early because you need to educate the whole world what you're doing, or it's a very stupid idea. So I don't want to sign that. And if the only guy on the planet that has this idea, it is probably not a good one.
That's a nice way of putting it. Amazing, and I do agree with the network that is absolutely foundational, and you do get that in those communities. And although I have to say, and as you mentioned before as well, there's been a lot of progress.
Yes.
I feel that there's so many more communities, a lot of more people involved, a lot of great people doing great stuff, engaging, bringing in more VCs, like prominent VCs, organizing meetups. Founders are sharing more. So of course there is movement, but there is still a big room for improvement. And I feel that I'm a product guy and a growth guy, and I feel that's something we can do much better in Norway. Yeah. That competency, product and growth, I still think that's a major opportunity. For example, I think we're much stronger in design. For example, we have a very strong design culture. Yeah. I feel there's less talent available on product and growth, which is what you have a lot in Silicon Valley, for example.
You're spot on, and we have so much kind of like smart people. I totally agree with you. We have a lot of people in Norway that has the title product manager. I'm not sure if that is the same as a product manager elsewhere, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yes,
that's a skill that is definitely both needed and lacking. But also, I totally agree with you. Like, things are absolutely getting much better in Norway. So it's not it's moving fast. It's moving forward. Is much more positive. And I kind of like when I started ForgeRock back in the days, I tried to get some funding locally in my beautiful hometown Stavanger that I love more than anything. Actually, I love my kids also a lot. But at that time, they were investing in 3 things. This is a way back. So they were investing, of course, in Stavanger in oil, and they were, of course, investing in fish. And the third thing was fish in oil. So, so that's getting investment in a tech company in those days. That was mission impossible. And then you need to go somewhere else.
Absolutely, Lasse. This was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was great meeting you.
Thank you for having me, and I'll hope I see you in Stavanger soon.
All right, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you subscribe to my newsletter so you don't miss out, and see you next time.